How does someone who never leaves home without permission vanish overnight? Jonathan Hoang was 21 years old, but developmentally, his family said he functions more like an 8 or 9-year-old child. He follows rules. He asks permission before getting a glass of water. He wears the same jacket every time he steps outside, rain or shine. His days run like clockwork. He does not leave without telling someone. Until one night, he did. Sometime overnight, when everyone else was sleeping, Jonathan walked out of his family's home without his jacket, without his phone, without his wallet. But he took one thing, an iPad. The device he used most. The device that hasn't been recovered. The device that may hold the only clue to what happened. 3 months later, surveillance footage surfaced 40 miles away, showing someone who looks just like Jonathan, wandering around a neighborhood in the dark, appearing lost. And instead of answers, there were only more questions. So what really happened to Jonathan Hoang? Before we continue, if you're new here, my name's Amanda, and this is Their Voice Matters, where we tell true crime stories with clarity and care, always centering the people whose voices deserve to be heard. If that matters to you, I'd love to have you here. So please like and subscribe or follow the podcast. It really does help these stories reach more people. Today, we're walking through the disappearance of Jonathan Hoang and the unanswered questions that still surround his case. Jonathan Hoang was born on August 30th, 2003, to his parents Tao and Anne. He has an older sister, Irene, who is 10 years older than him, and a younger sister who would soon follow. He grew up with his family in Arlington, Washington, about an hour north of Seattle, in a small, quiet neighborhood made up of just a few cul-de-sac streets, with one way in and one way out. It's outside the city, somewhat rural, a place where everyone knows everyone. A safe neighborhood. No crime, no major problems. The kind of place where families feel comfortable letting their children play outside. Jonathan was a happy child who grew up surrounded by love. According to his father, Tao, as a young child, Jonathan appeared to be thriving. But over time, his older sister Irene noticed he wasn't reaching the same developmental milestones as his peers. She encouraged their parents to have him evaluated to see whether he might benefit from additional support. In 2016, Jonathan was diagnosed with autism. In an interview with the Vanished podcast, Irene spoke about Jonathan's IEP, or Individualized Education Program Assessment. The evaluation is used to determine eligibility for special education services. He scored in the 0.4 percentile, meaning he was functioning significantly below his peers. But statistics only tell part of the story. Jonathan has been described by his family as very sweet, kind, thoughtful, wholesome, and innocent. A pure soul. If Irene wasn't feeling well, he would go outside and pick a dandelion to try to make her feel better. When his family would ask him what he wanted for Christmas or his birthday, he would often respond, "I'm grateful for what I have." He loves to eat, he loves coffee, and he loves root beer floats. Like many, though not all, people on the autism spectrum, Jonathan is very regimented in his routine. His schedule was described as being like clockwork. Tao said, quote, "He had his behavior, his pattern of life, that he pretty much sticks to very rigorously. He does the same thing every day. He wore the same jacket every time he left the house. Hood up, no matter the weather. Raining, jacket on. In the heat of the summer, jacket on. He prefers quiet environments and doesn't like loud noises. If he became anxious, he would pace or step outside for a walk. He loved those walks. Rain or shine, he followed the exact same route every single time. About a mile round trip from his home to the school bus stop and back. He crossed the street in the same place, walked the same stretch of road. Even the neighbors knew his routine. The neighborhood doesn't have sidewalks, but Jonathan always stayed on the road and never went onto anyone else's property. He did have some independence. He can shower on his own, though sometimes he needs reminders to rinse his hair thoroughly. He can heat food in the microwave if it was already prepared, and walked his familiar route several times a day by himself. While Jonathan may appear to be a typical 21-year-old at first glance, his family said his mental capacity is closer to that of an 8, 9, maybe 10-year-old child, something that becomes apparent in conversation. Here is a video of Jonathan on his 19th birthday in 2022.
Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear JJ. Happy birthday to you.
Okay, can I blow out the candles with my hand now?
Okay.
Not working. You gotta lick the candle. There.
You did it.
Oh, use both my hands.
He isn't able to cook a full meal. He can't drive or take public transportation independently. He doesn't know how to use money. He needs assistance managing medications. His sister Irene said, quote, "He's not capable of doing things like preparing and cooking himself a meal, or going to a store and following a shopping list, getting groceries and then paying for it with cash. He wouldn't have the executive functioning for that." Something else his family emphasized is that Jonathan is deeply respectful of adults and authority. Irene said, quote, "He kept to a routine and he asks permission to do almost anything, whether it's going for a walk or even to get a drink of water. He would ask permission." His family said that if he asked permission to do something and was told no, he might ask again later, but ultimately he respected the answer. He did not do things without permission. Tao said, quote, "If any adults tell him to do something, he would do it. He's very submissive to a figure of authority. He prefers the company of adults over peers. He can hold a conversation, but he wouldn't initiate one. His social circle was small: family, neighbors, teachers, and students in his transitions program. And that program would become important." Jonathan was enrolled in a school transitions program designed to help students with special needs build skills for adulthood. As he approached graduation at age 21, teachers were preparing him for part-time work and teaching him how to communicate through text and email, skills he would need to interact with employers. Just a couple of months before he disappeared, Jonathan learned how to send a text message. He sent his very first one to Irene. She said she was so excited and proud of him. He also set up a new email account with assistance from teachers, since he would lose access to his school email after graduation. This wasn't something he could do independently. There were too many steps, but he was learning. Jonathan had an iPhone, but it wasn't connected to his iPad, which was his preferred device. The iPad was an older model without cellular service, but it could connect to Wi-Fi. Parental controls limited who he could call or text. But at the school's request, some of those restrictions had been loosened, so he could learn how to browse the internet and use online tools more independently. He had previously experienced bullying through an online game's chat feature, even with those controls in place. His family encouraged him to ignore those messages and continue playing his game. Lifting some restrictions was meant to help him grow. Jonathan was learning. He was gaining small pieces of independence. But independence for Jonathan didn't mean leaving home. Jonathan's family had talked to him about what his future might look like. They reassured him that he was always welcome to live at home, but as his parents aged, there would eventually need to be other arrangements. They asked if he might want to live in some kind of assisted living community one day, somewhere that offered support but allowed for some independence. Jonathan's answer was simple. He wanted to live at home with his parents forever. His sister Irene shared that when he graduated high school at 18, he became upset watching his classmates prepare to leave for college. He thought he was supposed to move out too. His family reassured him that he didn't have to. Home was where he wanted to be. On the evening of Sunday, March 30th, 2025, around 7:30 p.m., Jonathan's father, Tao, was running on the treadmill. Jonathan came into the room and asked if he could sleep downstairs in the guest bedroom. Tao said, quote, "I asked him why, and he said, well, the treadmill is kind of noisy. I said, well, it's a short run. I'll be done within an hour, way before your bedtime." Jonathan said, okay. Tao asked him to take the family's Yorkie, Lady, outside. Jonathan put on his jacket and shoes, took her out, came back inside, removed his jacket and shoes, and returned to his room. A little while later, Jonathan came back again. This time he was holding his iPad. He asked if he could stay home from school the next day because he wasn't feeling well. Tao said, quote, "I said, well, if that's the case tomorrow, take a rest. If you don't feel well in the morning, talk with mom and you can stay home." And he said, okay. Tao saw Jonathan one more time that night. This time, Jonathan was heading downstairs toward the guest bedroom. Tao said, quote, "Jonathan said, I'm going to bed. And I thought it was kind of a little bit strange because we've talked about him sleeping in his room. But I thought, well, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. So I said, good night, and he just nodded and then went away." It struck Tao as slightly unusual. Jonathan almost always asked permission before doing anything. But this time, he seemed to have made the decision to sleep downstairs on his own. Still, nothing felt alarming. Later that night, the family went to bed. The next morning, Tao left for work at around 5:30 a.m. Around 6:30 a.m., Anne went to Jonathan's room to wake him up and get him ready for school. But he wasn't there. Not in the bedroom, not in the bathroom, not in the kitchen. She called out his name. No answer. Maybe he'd gotten up early. Maybe Tao had taken him to the bus stop. She called him. Tao said, quote, "I was already at work, and then my wife called about 6:38 a.m. and said, 'Hey, did you take Jonathan to school?' He hadn't. But then he remembered. Jonathan went downstairs to sleep in the guest room. Anne went downstairs. He wasn't there either." Tao said, quote, "She called me back some 5 minutes later and said, 'I can't find him.' She and my daughter went and looked and couldn't find him. At that point, I asked her to call the police." Anne called the school to see if Jonathan had somehow walked to the bus stop on his own, which would have been something completely out of his routine. The school confirmed he wasn't there. Anne called her eldest daughter, Irene. Irene said, quote, "She sounded frightened and said, 'Jonathan's missing.' She said, 'I can't find him anywhere.' And she said, 'Should I call the police?' I said, 'Yes, call the police.' This wasn't like Jonathan. He never left the house without permission. He didn't vary from his routine. He didn't disappear into the night." Tao immediately left work and rushed home. Irene left work and rushed there too. By the time Tao arrived home around 8 a.m., the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office was already at the house. They began looking for clues. If Jonathan had left on his own, surely he would have taken his jacket. The jacket he wore anytime he stepped outside, no matter the weather. And it had been a cold, rainy, typical Pacific Northwest spring night. But the jacket was still there. So were his shoes. So were his wallet, cash, passport, and phone. Tao said it was completely out of place for Jonathan to have left without his jacket. He said, quote, "That's how he regulates himself and feels safe, is with his jacket and hoodie. But he left without his jacket. You know, it was really early spring, March, and it was really cold. Only 3 items were missing. His iPad that he never took outside, the wired earbuds that he used with it, and Anne's gardening slippers, the one she kept by the downstairs door, the same door that led outside from the guest bedroom, a door that was unlocked." And just like that, Jonathan was gone. Between 7:30 p.m. and 6:30 a.m., something happened, and no one knew what. Following Anne's 911 call, search and rescue began fairly quickly. Jonathan was entered into the National Law Enforcement Database as a missing person, and search and rescue teams were sent to the house. Based on the environment and the initial information available, the early working assumption appeared to be that Jonathan may have wandered off and become lost. The family lives in a somewhat rural area. Being the Pacific Northwest, dense forest surrounds their small neighborhood, just a few cul-de-sac streets, and beyond that, woods. So that's where the search efforts mainly concentrated in the beginning. Irene said she was impressed by the response. There were a lot of people out there searching for Jonathan. They had professional trackers, scent dogs, helicopters, drones, infrared technology, all deployed in a coordinated effort to find him. And searchers knew locating him could be even more difficult because Jonathan is on the autism spectrum. His family said he is unlikely to self-advocate, seek help from strangers, or intentionally make himself visible. He doesn't know what to do if he's lost. Although he would respond to his name, he doesn't remember things like phone numbers or his address. Time mattered. Irene immediately made a missing person flyer. The family posted that Jonathan was missing on their neighborhood Facebook page, and neighbors quickly joined the search. Even though Jonathan had never gone onto anyone's property before, always staying on the road during his walks, neighbors checked their backyards, sheds, and outbuildings anyway. There was no sign of him. The Snohomish County Sheriff's Office posted Jonathan's information and photo on social media within hours. They issued press releases to local media outlets and initiated a reverse 911 call, notifying residents in the surrounding area. Search and rescue teams worked from that Monday, March 31st, through the week, culminating in a large coordinated search that Saturday. Over the course of the week, 150 searchers logged approximately 4,000 man-hours looking for Jonathan. Irene said searchers were certain they would find Jonathan's body in the woods during that Saturday search. But they didn't. No clothing or footprints or belongings. No sign of him at all. On Friday, April 4th, 5 days after Jonathan disappeared, an endangered missing person alert was issued. Unlike an Amber or Silver alert, it doesn't push emergency notifications directly to phones. Instead, the Washington State Patrol created a flyer and shared it online and with the media. By the end of that first week, something was becoming clear. If Jonathan had wandered into the woods, there should have been some trace of him, but there wasn't. So if he didn't walk into the forest, then where did he go? With no sign of Jonathan in the woods, attention turned to scent work. According to Irene, scent dogs detected Jonathan's scent in the yard, but that immediately raised a question. Did he go outside again later that night? Or was the scent simply from earlier, when he took the family dog out before bed? Handlers did not find a clear scent trail leaving the property. The dogs also didn't detect his scent along his usual walking route. However, 2 dogs did detect his scent at the end of the cul-de-sac. And then, nothing. There was no continued trail or direction of travel, or any clear endpoint. It's important to understand how scent tracking works. Dogs aren't following footprints the way we might imagine. They track microscopic skin cells that shed from the human body. Those cells can drift with the wind, move downhill, settle in low areas, and even pool depending on the terrain. In Jonathan's neighborhood, the cul-de-sac slopes downhill from his house. Handlers cautioned that scent can travel and accumulate in those types of conditions. It also rained the night Jonathan disappeared, and the neighborhood has no sidewalks, just pavement regularly driven over by cars. Both rain and vehicle traffic can disperse or degrade scent. So while dogs detected Jonathan's scent in the yard and at the end of the cul-de-sac, they did not find a continuous walking trail away from the home. That absence became significant. Based on the scent work, or lack of a sustained trail, law enforcement said they believed Jonathan likely left in a vehicle. The family has said they also have come to that same conclusion. By the end of that first week, the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office transferred the case to their major crimes unit, and a detective was assigned. Searches in the surrounding area continued throughout April, by foot and by air. But still, there was no sign of Jonathan. Investigators conducted a digital analysis of Jonathan's phone and computer. According to the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office, or SCSO, they did not find anything of evidentiary value or any clear indication of what may have happened. But there was one device they couldn't analyze: Jonathan's iPad. And that matters, because his family says that was his primary device. It was what he used most often. If Jonathan had been communicating with someone online, his family believes the answers are likely on that iPad. The problem is, the iPad is missing. Tao purchased the iPad, and it is connected to his Apple ID, but it was not backed up. Even with Tao's expressed consent, Apple has not provided data on the iPad. In the days after Jonathan disappeared, a family member contacted Apple to see whether the device had connected to the internet. They told Apple it had been stolen. According to the family, an Apple technician indicated the iPad was briefly online on April 2nd, 3 days after Jonathan disappeared. Apple would not provide further information. The family passed this information along to SCSO. Law enforcement has said they have not confirmed whether that connection occurred. It's unclear whether that means they were unable to verify it or if they did not pursue the issue further. The iPad also doesn't have cellular service. According to SCSO, that prevented them from being able to ping or track it in real time, as they would have been able to with a phone. They were also unable to locate it using the Find My app. At that point, the issue became legal. Apple has refused to provide account data without a warrant. The family was able to obtain a civil subpoena from a judge ordering Apple to release records associated with the iPad. But according to the family, Apple denied that request, stating it had to come from law enforcement. A civil subpoena obtained by a private party is not the same as a criminal search warrant obtained by law enforcement. Under federal privacy law, including the Stored Communications Act, certain types of digital content generally can't be released to private individuals, even with a subpoena. They typically require a legal process initiated by law enforcement in a criminal investigation, and that's where this case becomes complicated. According to SCSO, at this stage in the investigation, they did not have evidence that a crime occurred. Without evidence of a crime, they said they don't meet the legal threshold required to obtain a warrant. And that creates a deadlock. To obtain a warrant, investigators must demonstrate probable cause that a crime occurred. But if the potential evidence of a crime is on the iPad, and the iPad can't be accessed without a warrant, it becomes a legal catch-22. That impasse has been one of the most frustrating aspects of this case for Jonathan's family and for many following it. The family could attempt to challenge Apple's refusal in court, but doing so would likely require lengthy and expensive litigation. Irene said, quote, "It's such a simple step law enforcement can do, and I don't know why they won't. You don't have to have cellular data on an iPad to ping Wi-Fi networks and logs of connected routers and MAC addresses and geolocation history. It could be accessed or cross-referenced by Apple internet service providers. and we have no evidence that law enforcement has pursued this or done this. We asked if they could at least issue letters of preservation to save critical digital data, and they weren't even willing to do that. Since the iPad technically belongs to Tao, the family was able to place it in lost mode. If it connects to Wi-Fi, they would receive a notification. But so far, there have been no updates. There was another digital detail that raised questions for the family. After Jonathan's disappearance, Tao said he powered on his phone and saw something unusual. He said, quote, "We turned on his phone, the battery had worn down, and there was a notification. There was a couple of notifications from somebody with a yahoo.com email address to him. But when I went to look at that email account, there was nothing from that email address. And I kicked myself for not doing a screenshot of the notification because I assumed it would be in his email or in his text or something. But none of it is there." Tao said he asked their private investigator what that might mean. He said, well, they could have a hidden app or hidden program that you really don't see unless you have specialized equipment to go and track it and dig it out. And we just don't have that. To be clear, there is no confirmed evidence that a hidden app was involved. But for the family, the unexplained notification, combined with the missing iPad, reinforced their belief that digital communication may hold important answers. And without the iPad, that piece of the digital puzzle is still missing. Jonathan's case has sparked significant public discussion, particularly regarding how the investigation has been handled. Before we examine the family's concerns, it's important to clearly outline what Snohomish County Sheriff's Office has said about their efforts. According to SCSO, they have been in, quote, consistent, almost daily correspondence with Jonathan's family. They also say they have met with the family multiple times. They have acknowledged that since this is an active and unresolved case, they can't disclose all investigative details to the family or to the public. But they say they continue to provide information when appropriate. Regarding the difficulty in obtaining warrants, SCSO has stated, quote, "In Washington state, warrants can only be issued when there is probable cause to believe a crime has been committed. At this stage of the investigation, no evidence has emerged to indicate that a crime has occurred, so the legal threshold for obtaining a warrant has not been met. However, this does not mean detectives have ruled out any possibilities. They continue to explore all avenues, including the potential that criminal activity may have played a role in Jonathan's disappearance. At this time, there is no evidence of criminal activity or foul play. This remains an active investigation." In addition, SCSO has said they maintain working relationships with local, state, and federal agencies, and that they have been in contact with outside partners, including Washington State Patrol, regarding Jonathan's case. They have stated they have not declined assistance from other agencies. However, how and when outside agencies may become involved is something that has been discussed and questioned by the family. We'll explore that perspective shortly. While the search and rescue efforts were extensive in that first week, Jonathan's family has said their concerns began to grow once the case shifted into the investigative phase. They have consistently commended the search and rescue teams, but they have also expressed frustration that investigators were not treating the case with the level of urgency they felt it required. So they began taking steps on their own. Early on, the family hired a private investigator, a former law enforcement officer, to review information and compile potential leads. According to the family, the goal was not to replace investigators, but to assist them, to gather information, organize data, and make the work easier to follow up on. They started at home. According to Irene, the family did have a Ring doorbell, but they didn't have a subscription for video recording at the time, so it only functioned as a doorbell. It did, however, log motion activity, including door lock and unlock events. When they reviewed the log, there were only 2 entries around the time Jonathan disappeared. One at approximately 7 p.m. when Jonathan returned from his usual evening walk, entering through the front door as he always did, and another the following morning when Anne went outside searching for him. There were no logged events in between. The downstairs door, the one leading from the guest bedroom to the deck and backyard, was unlocked, and that door did not have a camera or motion sensor. Beyond the home itself, the family began looking outward. According to the family, law enforcement asked them to assist in getting video surveillance footage from their neighbors. So they did. Because the neighborhood is small, with just a few cul-de-sac streets and only one way in and one way out, they believed any movement in or out during that overnight window would be significant. Several neighbors had security cameras. One camera in particular was positioned directly at the entrance and exit of the neighborhood, capturing every vehicle and pedestrian who entered or left. Jonathan was seen on that footage during his last evening walk, following his usual route. But there was no footage of him leaving the neighborhood on foot, only vehicles. Because the neighborhood is so small and isolated, the family was quickly able to compile a list of residents' vehicles and account for most regular traffic, including known visitors and delivery vehicles. The time frame when Jonathan disappeared is relatively narrow, between 7:30 p.m. and 6:30 a.m. Within that window, vehicles could be identified, categorized, and in most cases, eliminated. According to Irene, quote, "There's a couple of vehicles on the surveillance that still haven't been accounted for yet, but no one saw anything abnormal for the most part." The family compiled the footage, documented the license plates that were accounted for, and turned that information over to investigators. According to Irene, one of the biggest challenges in the early days of the investigation was explaining Jonathan's level of independence in a way that law enforcement understood. She said, quote, "I think a big struggle for them was determining where on the spectrum he was. When they came to talk to me on the first or second day, they asked, is he high or low functioning? My response was, well, high." Irene later reflected on that answer. She said she was trying to ensure investigators didn't simply assume Jonathan ran into the woods and got lost. But she believes that word, high, may have unintentionally shaped the way the case was viewed. She said, quote, "I am probably going to regret saying that for the rest of my life, because again, while he presents as a 21-year-old, he's not capable of going off and starting a new life, which was, I think, their impression that first week. They kept going back and forth between assuming he had gotten lost in the woods and he was deceased, or that he had planned to leave my parents and start a new life somewhere, which is, again, neither of those. I remember telling the deputy sheriff, why can't we more thoroughly investigate him being kidnapped or taken? He said, well, no offense, but what would someone want with him?" Autism is referred to as a spectrum because there's a wide variation in how it presents. Some individuals are nonverbal and require full-time support. Others live independently, maintain careers, have their own families, and need little to no assistance. Many fall somewhere in between. Terms like high functioning and low functioning are widely considered outdated and overly simplistic. They don't explain the nuances of someone's strengths, limitations, and support needs. According to the family, that early characterization may have influenced how Jonathan's disappearance was interpreted, particularly the possibility that he may have left voluntarily. The family has said that extended relatives, neighbors, teachers, and school staff were largely aligned in how they described Jonathan's abilities. However, they say one school staff member, an assistant, not a licensed teacher, communicated a different impression. Irene said, quote, "One school staff member had told them that they thought he could ride the bus independently because they'd been practicing, and they used that rationale for not issuing the endangered missing person alert. That was a misstep." Tao said, quote, "The word autism has certain stereotypes, but autism is a spectrum. I think they made the assumption without verifying the facts with the family, even though we repeatedly told law enforcement, that is not Jonathan. That is not his pattern of life." He added, quote, "This person was very vociferous. She was the lone person that said that he is smarter than anyone gives him credit for, that he's fully capable of independent living by himself, that she felt he can take public transportation, go apply for jobs, and live on his own. Law enforcement chose to ignore the neighbors, to ignore us, and seemingly rely on one individual who is not a licensed teacher, not a licensed healthcare professional. That's the one person that we brought to law enforcement, but they said, that's interesting, but it's not a criminal investigation." From the family's perspective, these early assumptions may have influenced how urgently certain avenues were pursued. Whether or not that was the intent, the family has said they felt unheard. And that misunderstanding, they believe, shaped the trajectory of this case from the very beginning. Jonathan's family, along with some community supporters, have raised concerns about how this case has been handled. Some of those concerns center on legal and procedural limitations involving missing adults. Others, they say, stem from how Jonathan's abilities were interpreted early on. According to Irene, by the end of the first week, law enforcement acknowledged that it appeared Jonathan left in a vehicle. At that point, the case was transferred to the Major Crimes Unit. However, she said that the family was also told that it is not illegal for someone to get into a car, and that even a minor getting into a car with a stranger is not automatically illegal. The family has never argued that getting into the vehicle itself is the crime. Their concern is why Jonathan would have done so, and this highlights a difficult legal gray area. In the United States, a legal adult who is not under guardianship has the right to leave voluntarily, even if the decision appears unwise, manipulated, or unsafe. It's not illegal to persuade someone to leave. However, it is illegal to coerce, threaten, defraud, exploit, or abduct someone. The challenge arises when there is no immediate evidence of force or coercion. From law enforcement's perspective, without evidence of a crime, they may not meet the legal threshold to escalate certain actions. From the family's perspective, Jonathan's mental age, high compliance with authority figures, and inability to assess risk meant he was uniquely vulnerable, even without visible signs of force. That tension sits at the heart of this case. The family has said they asked investigators to issue letters of preservation to protect digital data before it could be automatically deleted by service providers, which they had 30 days to do so. They also suggested tools such as geofence warrants, which can identify devices present in a specific location during a defined timeframe. According to the family, those steps were not pursued. They say they were told that there were resource limitations and that without evidence of a crime, certain investigative measures weren't justified. They say investigators indicated the department was understaffed and balancing other serious cases, including active homicides, and that without clear evidence of a crime, in Jonathan's case, certain investigative measures were not prioritized. From the family's perspective, hearing that comparison was difficult. To them, Jonathan's disappearance felt urgent and life-threatening. Those conversations about resources became especially frustrating when it came to a lead they believed could be clearly examined. As discussed earlier, the family gathered hours of surveillance footage from neighbors in their small, single-entry neighborhood. They documented vehicle movements, identified known cars, and narrowed down a small number that were not immediately accounted for. Tao said, quote, "We have really good actionable data that they won't even look at because it's not a crime. This video that captured all the people that go in and out of our development, we mapped out every occurrence of people going in and out throughout the night. Tracked down pretty much every vehicle except for a couple that were not identified by anybody in the neighborhood as their vehicle or friends or visitors or deliveries. We gave that to the sheriff's department. They said, okay, well, that's interesting. It's a free country. People can go wherever they want and not do anything wrong." Irene said, quote, "The week my parents got in touch with the detective, he even told them, looking at that footage isn't a good use of my time." The family said they felt this minimized what they believed could have been important leads. They also said that increased media coverage by local Seattle news outlets appeared to prompt renewed attention to the footage the family had provided. The family has said they were not formally interviewed in the months after Jonathan disappeared. They have also stated that neighbors weren't interviewed either. From the family's perspective, these steps would have been expected early in a case involving a missing vulnerable adult. Another issue raised by the family was guardianship. They said they were told obtaining guardianship after Jonathan's disappearance could allow investigators to share more information with them. Guardianship of an adult is not a simple process, especially if that adult isn't present. It requires legal filings, court proceedings, and financial resources. The family ultimately secured guardianship after a judge felt there was sufficient cause. According to the family, they were later told by law enforcement that guardianship did not change the investigative situation. Tao said he believed investigators did not think the family would succeed in getting guardianship of Jonathan. This felt like a moving target, being asked to complete steps that ultimately didn't change the trajectory of the case. Irene recalled, quote, "My mom asked, what would it take, short of a body, for you to investigate this as a crime? They didn't answer. One of your deputies or your sheriffs told my mother, he can go off and start a new life if he wants, and he'll probably come home with a wife and 2 kids and a beard, and you'll have a good laugh about it." According to the family, comments like that reflected a deeper concern, that Jonathan's vulnerabilities were being underestimated, and that this influenced the urgency, or lack thereof, of the investigation. Another concern raised by the family involves outside agency involvement. While the sheriff's office has said they maintain working relationships with local, state, and federal partners, the family has said they requested the formation of a multi-agency task force and involvement from the Washington State Patrol and FBI. Irene said, quote, "We asked SCSO, are you going to ask for an interagency task force or something to be created with WSP and the FBI? And they said, we're capable of doing that, but no, there's no evidence of a crime, so we're not going to do that." This reinforced their belief that this case was not being treated with the seriousness they felt it warranted. The Autism Foundation, which has been assisting the family and working on their behalf, has also filed formal complaints regarding the handling of the case. Those complaints raise questions about communication, investigative prioritization, and procedural decisions. One question that often comes up in cases like this: if law enforcement had immediately treated Jonathan's disappearance as an abduction, would that have changed what they were legally able to do? Under Washington state law and under federal privacy law, investigators still need probable cause that a crime has occurred in order to obtain certain warrants, including those that would compel companies like Apple to release account data. A belief or suspicion, even a strong one, is not always enough. Probable cause typically requires solid evidence, something concrete that points to criminal activity. In Jonathan's case, there were concerning circumstances, but no visible signs of forced entry, no confirmed witnesses to an abduction, and no direct evidence that a crime had occurred inside the home. And that legal distinction matters. It doesn't mean a crime didn't happen. It means investigators have to meet a defined threshold before certain tools become available. For the Hoang family, that threshold feels impossible because the very evidence that might establish probable cause could be on the missing iPad. For law enforcement, without that evidence, the legal pathway to obtain it may not exist. They may have been able to issue letters of preservation to save the iPad's data, but other legal standards still may not have been met. That's part of why Jonathan's family have pushed for legislative change. They believe cases involving missing adults with developmental disabilities may require different tools and different urgency, even when traditional signs of a crime are not immediately visible. We'll talk more about that shortly. Now that we've walked through the search and the investigation, we need to briefly step back. Because in the days after Jonathan disappeared, his family started replaying the moments that led up to that night. And a few things began to feel different. At the time, they seemed small, but in hindsight, they didn't. Jonathan was known for being honest, respectful, obedient, almost rigidly so. But just 2 days before he vanished, on March 28th, something happened that deeply unsettled his family later. He had a doctor's appointment. Jonathan had previously been prescribed Adderall to help him focus, but had stopped taking it because the side effects made him feel unwell. His parents supported that decision. At that appointment, however, Jonathan was alone with the doctor, and he told her that his mom had instructed him to restart the medication. But that wasn't true. His parents had not told him that. For a young man who typically asked for permission before getting a glass of water, lying to a doctor was wildly out of character. His family couldn't understand why he would say that. If he was struggling to focus at school, he could have simply said that. They would have listened. So why lie? There's been online speculation that someone was trying to get Adderall from Jonathan, and they encouraged him to restart the medication so they could get access to it. However, only a couple of pills were missing, consistent with Jonathan taking them for a couple of days himself, and the medication was left at home. There's no evidence tying the prescription to his disappearance, but the fact that he lied at all stood out. Also, in the months leading up to his disappearance, Jonathan had occasionally asked to stay home from school. At first, this wasn't alarming. He had been dealing with some physical health issues that were eventually resolved through surgery. That alone could explain some missed days. But around that same time, his school transitions program was focusing on increasing independence. Students were doing job training, practicing communication skills, preparing for part-time work, even going to Goodwill for supervised job experience. Tao later said that Jonathan didn't seem to enjoy that shift. When he said he didn't feel well and wanted to stay home, they let him. It didn't seem unusual. Until it did. On Thursday, March 27th, 3 days before he disappeared, Jonathan said he wasn't feeling well and stayed home from school. Then on Sunday, March 30th, he asked if he could stay home again the next day. His dad told him to sleep on it and decide in the morning. But the next morning, he was gone. Then there's Jonathan wanting to sleep downstairs. He'd slept downstairs before. That on its own wasn't unusual, but that night felt different. Earlier, he had asked to move because of the treadmill noise. His dad explained that he would be done soon. Normally, that would have been the end of it. Jonathan typically accepted answers, even if he didn't like them. But this time, he didn't ask again. He didn't negotiate. He just went downstairs anyway. Tao later reflected, quote, "For him to take the initiative to go downstairs, to go sleep anyway after we talked, which now makes me think about it, it's really unusual. Because usually when we talk about something, he accepted it, and it's done now. If he really wanted it, he'd come back and ask for it again. But this time, he decided on his own initiative just to go. That's what stands out. Not just that he slept downstairs, but that he chose proximity to an exterior door without a camera. His bedroom was next to his parents' room, but downstairs offered easier access to outside. Was that intentional? Was he expecting someone? Or is it simply a coincidence made into a connection in hindsight? These moments don't prove anything, but they do make you wonder, because when someone disappears without explanation, the smallest deviations start to matter. And for a young man as routine-driven as Jonathan, even the smallest deviations were rare. After Jonathan's disappearance was featured in local media, tips began pouring in. Possible sightings, blurry photos, well-meaning leads. Most of the leads were ruled out, until one wasn't. On June 30th, 2025, 3 months after Jonathan vanished, Irene opened a message that stopped her cold. It contained screenshots from a home security camera in the Juanita area of Kirkland, Washington, about 40 miles south of Arlington. The footage itself was from the previous week, captured between 11 p.m. and midnight on June 23rd. It showed a thin young man with brown hair moving unsteadily, seemingly unsure of where he wants to go or what he wants to do. He changed directions several times. He approached the front door, then walked away. Irene quickly obtained the full video. It's somewhat blurry, but she said that she was 99% sure it was Jonathan. Not because of his face, which is difficult to make out, but because of the way he moves. His gait, his posture, his mannerisms. They are distinctive. Soon, 2 additional neighbors found footage from their own cameras. In one clip, the young man appears to attempt to enter a porta potty before crossing the street and walking out of frame. This was the first possible confirmed sighting of Jonathan since the night he disappeared. The family had the audio enhanced. In it, they said they could hear one of Jonathan's vocal stems, a soft sound. Irene said, quote, "I wouldn't say we can be 100% positive unless he walked up to the camera and said, 'Hi, I'm Jonathan. We're trying to get the video enhanced ourselves, but we're 99% confident it's him. We have 3 video feeds where we can see him walking. He walks in such a distinctive way. We can hear his vocal stems. Out of all of the videos or photos we have, this is the only time, the only one where I think it's him." The footage was shown to extended family, teachers, and school staff. According to the family, everyone agreed. They believed this was Jonathan. Seeing him brought relief and heartbreak. Irene said, quote, "It's really hard for me to watch because he just looks lost. He does look thinner to us, and he does look stressed and lost to us. He looks dysregulated. Dysregulated meaning emotionally or neurologically overwhelmed, struggling to regulate stress. But there was something else," his family said, quote, "In recent footage, Jonathan is shown clean and groomed and does not appear to have been outside for 3 months. He cannot live without assistance. Someone had him or has him." The clothing appeared similar to items Jonathan owned. The pants were similar to a pair missing from the home. The shirt resembled several he had. The shoes were similar to older pairs his mom had purchased, but they can't conclusively say the clothes were his. As Irene explained, quote, "My mom buys him multiple pairs and she's wondering if maybe it's an older pair. But again, we don't want to just say without confidence, yes, those are his clothes, because the footage needs to be enhanced. But it's not perfect and we aren't fully confident the clothes and the shoes are his." In one of the clips, the porta potty footage, he appears to be holding a device, possibly an iPad. Jonathan's missing iPad is in lost mode, which should notify the family if it connects to Wi-Fi. They've never received a notification. So if that is an iPad, is it Jonathan's? Is it different? If it's different, how did he get it? The family asked for the footage to be enhanced. They said they were told law enforcement has the capability to do so, but according to them, it was not pursued. Irene said, quote, "Snohomish told me, well, he looks fine on the footage, which was really upsetting. I can't tell you how much that broke me. Their lack of care. He's clearly lost or looks like he doesn't know where he's going or what he's doing. He's stimming." Their response was, well, he doesn't look like he's in distress, just a total lack of urgency, no offers to help. Jurisdiction complicated things. Jonathan was reported missing in Snohomish County, which retained primary jurisdiction. The footage was captured in King County. According to the family, agencies in King County indicated they would need Snohomish County to formally request or coordinate further action. The family said that coordination did not occur in the way they expected. As a result, no formal search of that neighborhood was organized by law enforcement. It's important to note, while the family believes the person in the footage is Jonathan, The Snohomish County Sheriff's Office has not publicly confirmed the identity of the individual in the video. The family said, quote, "We recently learned that Kirkland PD was ready to launch a full search and rescue effort the week of July 1st, but did not after receiving word from SCSO that the footage from Kirkland was not of Jonathan. We never heard from SCSO or the detective handling the case that they didn't believe the footage was him." Their private investigator said the footage should be treated as evidence and formally enhanced. Tao said he asked the detective if it could be enhanced, and he was told yes. He then asked if it would be enhanced, and he received no answer. When he asked again, he was told, quote, "No comment." Irene said, quote, "My dad asked, what is your protocol then when you have an endangered missing person who's a vulnerable adult? We have guardianship, he's missing, and there's a sighting. It looks like someone else is taking care of him." And Snohomish's response was, "Well, when the person that has him brings him in, or when someone finds him and returns him to you, we'll check him off our list." Frustrated, the family organized their own search effort. More than 100 volunteers showed up. They canvassed the neighborhood, hung flyers, checked shelters, visited food banks, and searched encampments. They found nothing. No one had seen Jonathan. There was one more detail that stuck out to them. The footage was captured on Northeast 114th Lane in Kirkland. Jonathan's home is on 114th Drive Northeast in Arlington. His family has said he didn't know his full address, but is it possible that he saw 114th and thought he was close to home? Tao said, quote, "It looks like he was trying his hardest to get home even though he doesn't know his address." How he got to Kirkland, why he was there, and where he went after remain unknown. There isn't enough evidence to definitively explain what happened to Jonathan. Based on the available information, there are really only a few broad possibilities. Let's go through each of those. The first being that he left voluntarily, intending to start a new life. Jonathan is legally an adult. In the US, adults have the right to leave home voluntarily, even if that decision appears unwise. However, several facts make this scenario difficult to reconcile. He left behind his ID, cash, and wallet. He left behind his phone. He left behind his jacket that he wore daily, rain or shine. He wore his mother's gardening shoes instead of his own. He had never demonstrated independent travel ability. And he didn't know how to take public transportation alone. And then there's the Kirkland footage. If that is Jonathan, he appears disoriented and unsure. If he intentionally left to start a new life, why does he appear to be approaching houses hesitantly? Houses on the same street number as his own? Why does he appear lost? Based on the publicly available information, it's difficult to imagine Jonathan choosing to leave home to start a new life. Then there's the possibility that he left voluntarily, but under influence or persuasion. Jonathan has been described as being highly compliant with adults and authority figures. His father shared that neighbors would sometimes tell him to get in their car during rainy days when he was on his usual walk, and that he would comply without hesitation, only to continue his walk in the rain after being dropped off at home. If someone instructed him to do something, especially if it was framed as being urgent, he may not have questioned it. Jonathan had previously experienced bullying through online gaming platforms. His iPad was his primary device. If someone communicated with him digitally and persuaded him to step outside, that evidence would most likely be on the missing iPad. But without access to that device, there is no confirmed proof of coercion or manipulation. And finally, there's the possibility that he stepped outside briefly, only for something to occur immediately after. What if Jonathan didn't intend to leave long-term at all? He wore his mother's gardening shoes. He didn't take his jacket, wallet, or phone. Those details suggest urgency, possibly even the belief that he would return shortly. If someone told him, "Come outside for just a minute. This is important. Your family needs you," would he have complied? His family believes he might have. Tao said Jonathan is very protective of his family, and that if someone framed a situation as urgent or threatening, he may have followed instructions without fully understanding the risk. Jonathan's parents and sister believe he was lured. Tao said, quote, "Somebody knows where he's at. Somebody groomed him, coached him, persuaded him to leave. He may have left on his own because of that person's persuasion or misguided intention by somebody else, and then took him by force at that point and abducted him." Irene added, quote, "We really think that someone got a hold of him through his iPad and coerced him or lured him to go outside. It almost seems like he thought he would be outside for just a moment, and he thought he would be right back. or someone directed him to do specific things in a specific way and he was following instructions. He has to be receiving help from somewhere because he has no money, he has no ID, he has no phone, he has nothing other than himself and the clothes that he's wearing. The exact nature of Jonathan's disappearance remains the central unanswered question. Did he leave willingly? Was he persuaded? Was he coerced? Did something happen immediately after he stepped outside? At this point, there's just not enough evidence to determine a definitive conclusion, which is exactly what keeps this case open. Jonathan's family continues to search for him. They've organized rallies and honk and wave events on street corners to keep his face visible in the community. A local coffee stand distributed sleeves featuring Jonathan's photo and information. On his 22nd birthday, in August 2025, volunteers held a walkathon in the area where the Kirkland footage was captured to raise awareness and to remind the public that he is still missing. As of now, the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office has not released additional public updates. They have stated there is no confirmed evidence of a crime. What active investigative steps they are currently taking has not been released publicly. For Jonathan's family, the waiting continues. Jonathan's family has consistently asked that he remain the focus. Not speculation, not outrage. On their website, they wrote, quote, "With the increase of media coverage, please remember that Jonathan and his case is more than true crime. He is a brother, a son. He is a cousin, nephew, and grandson. We are real people, living real lives, and we are doing the best we can. Assume best intentions, and when you have a choice, move through the world with kindness and empathy." Behind the rallies and interviews, there is grief. Tao said, quote, "I feel like I'm in a nightmare. I just want to wake up and see my son again." Irene shared, quote, "I'm really scared because if he's out there and he's hurt, that hurts to not know where he is. The not knowing is really hard." Anne said, quote, "When we go out there and call his name, it's like the world is so big and we're so small. And we definitely need the community to have their eyes and ears out there for anything that might seem out of place, because that might be the ticket to bring Jonathan home." Tao added, quote, "We'll never give up looking for him until we find him." One of the most striking statements that Tao has made was directly to the person who may have Jonathan. He said, quote, "We don't have any malice, ill feelings toward his abductor. We try to live by our faith, and we're all human beings and we make mistakes. We want to let you know that everyone makes mistakes and we harbor no ill feelings and we just want Jonathan back. That's all we want." For them, this isn't about punishment. It's just about bringing their son home. The family has also pushed for change. They're advocating for Washington State to implement a purple alert system for missing adults with cognitive or developmental disabilities, similar to an Amber Alert. Senate Bill 6070, inspired by Jonathan's case, would create an alert system that could allow law enforcement additional tools in certain missing vulnerable adult cases. Supporters argue that the absence of obvious criminal evidence shouldn't automatically slow access to certain investigative tools, because in cases like this, waiting for probable cause may mean waiting for evidence that can't be accessed without it. Irene said, quote, "If the passing of this bill and the passing of this alert could save even one life, it would feel like, maybe something positive did come of this." She also shared that the bill was drafted by current and former high school students, independently, who were moved by Jonathan's story. Jonathan is 5'10". At the time of his disappearance, he weighed approximately 135 pounds, though his family believes he appeared thinner in the Kirkland footage. He has 2 moles on the left side of his face, 1 mole on his right inner forearm. If you have seen Jonathan or have information about his whereabouts, please contact Crime Stoppers of Puget Sound at 1-800-222-TIPS. That's 1-800-222-8477. Or submit a tip through the P3 TIPS app. There is a $100,000 reward for information leading to finding Jonathan. Here's what to look for. Jonathan may not tell someone he's lost. He may shut down when he's overwhelmed. He should respond to his name. He has a distinctive walk, sometimes with his hands held behind his back or arms bent with clenched fists. Occasionally, he makes a soft vocal sound. Often, he hunches his shoulders forward when sitting. He frequently uses phrases like, "I don't remember right now. My memory isn't very good. Can I go now? I'm grateful for what I have." He may appear disoriented or anxious. He may talk to himself. He previously relied heavily on wearing a jacket with the hood up, regardless of the weather. If you're watching on YouTube, I'll play the CCTV footage again so you can see his movement pattern. For podcast listeners, I encourage you to view the footage linked in the show notes. His gait may be one of the most identifiable features. I'll also play the birthday video once more so you can hear his voice.
Okay, can I blow out the candles with my hand now?
Okay. It's not working. You gotta lick the candle.
There!
You did it.
Oh.
Use both my hands.
If you think you see Jonathan, remain calm. Approach gently and non-threateningly. He may be anxious or overwhelmed. He may not immediately recognize he needs help. Ask if his name is Jonathan. Call 911 immediately. If safe to do so, try to keep him in sight or engaged in conversation until authorities arrive. If possible, discreetly take a photo or video of him to confirm his identity. Avoid escalating the situation or physically restraining him. Here's how you can help. Follow the family's Facebook page, Help Us Find Jonathan Hoang. Visit findjonathanhoang.com. Consider donating to their GoFundMe to assist with search efforts and legal resources. Sign their change.org petition requesting further law enforcement action. I will have the links to all of those in the description. And if you can't donate or volunteer, sharing Jonathan's story is powerful. The more people who recognize his face, his walk, and his voice, the better the chance that someone somewhere recognizes him. My heart goes out to the Hoang family. No family should have to live through this kind of uncertainty. Jonathan is someone's son, someone's brother, someone who relies on those who love him to take care of him. And cases like this force us to ask an uncomfortable question. If this were someone in our family, someone vulnerable, someone who couldn't advocate for themselves, how urgently would we want answers? That's why awareness matters. That's why sharing his story matters. I'll be keeping an eye out for Jonathan, and I hope you will too. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Based on the evidence we discussed, which scenario feels the most plausible to you, and why? Let's discuss in the comments. I'll be following Jonathan's case closely, and I'll share any updates as they come. If you'd like to stay informed and support stories like this, be sure to subscribe or follow the podcast. And if this episode meant something to you, clicking the like button really does help more people see Jonathan's story. If this case stood out to you, especially the questions around vulnerability and whether someone left voluntarily or they were in danger, I recommend checking out my episode on Emma Filipoff. Emma was also a young adult whose behavior changed before she vanished. And like Jonathan, there was surveillance footage that raised a lot of questions. I'll link that video here and in the description. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring, because these stories matter. I'll see you in the next episode.